This episode is brought to you by AWS Startups. AWS Startups supports entrepreneurs in Latin America across multiple programs, including cloud credits to help startups test features and extend runway, technical support to help optimize AWS solutions, and integrations with your product. They can also help startups build relationships with investment funds, accelerators, and companies to help your startup grow. We've invested in startups that AWS Startups team has referred to us. For more information and case studies from startups like Kavak, Wala, Nubank, Rappi, and more, check out aws.amazon.com/es/campaigns/founders, which we'll put in the show notes so you can find it easily, where you can access up to $1,350 in AWS credits for your startup.
Hello, and welcome from Guadalajara, Mexico to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where Nathan has conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those that have some connection to Latin America. My name is Araceli Dominguez, and I am PR Manager for LatinList, a proud sponsor of the Crossing Borders podcast. Sign up for weekly updates on LatinList.com to get a summary of the week's biggest headlines in Latin American tech news. Nathan's guest today is Santiago Aparicio, CEO and co-founder at Ontop, a platform that helps companies to streamline their international hiring and payment processes by managing contracts, taxes, regulatory compliance, and payments. Ontop is also a Magma Partners portfolio company as they invest in them in Fund 3. In this episode, Nathan and Santiago talk about Santiago's background as an entrepreneur and his experience working at Rappi. They also discuss Ontop's strategy for fundraising and client acquisition, as well as their growth story. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Santiago Aparicio.
Hey, Santiago, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being willing to do it.
How you doing, Nate? Thank you so much for the invitation. Pretty humble.
Of course. So where are you in the world today?
We're in Miami.
And tell me a little bit about the business. What are you up to today?
So basically, Ontop started as a software that could allow any company in the world to hire internationally. And very rapidly, we are envisioning a company that's going to basically build the infrastructure, financially speaking, for the future of work.
And give me some of the top line metrics in terms that you can share publicly. You guys have had meteoric growth over the last kind of 12 to 15 months. Give us a sense of the size of the business.
So basically, we're operating actively in 200 and something, like 190 something countries. We have people working all over the place. We are reaching a point in which we're transacting over $2 million per month at this month right now. And that's going to be growing around 40% month over month. And something that we're pretty grateful of and that we're really proud of as well is that we're experiencing most of the growth within our accounts. So that's going to mean that our retention is not good, it's great. So to make a long story short, we're better at keeping people happy than at getting new people.
So we'll go deeper into the story of Ontop in a bit here, but I wanted to dig into your background. You've got an interesting story to get to starting this company. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or was it something that came up in your career?
100% no, not even a clue. I just wanted in the beginning to be part of something cool. I didn't know what cool meant at that time, but as any young, I'd say person, you would say that cool is where money is flowing because you can do a lot of things with money. So I thought at that time that I wanted to be in banking because basically those guys, on my eyes, could make a lot of decisions to make high impact, which is totally opposite because they want to keep everything for themselves. However, I just was very driven to be in a position in which I could take a lot of assets, if I may be, to basically generate high impact, right? But then after I find myself doing a lot of Excels, timeless nights, I decided that I wanted to do something cooler. So I was lucky enough to have Felipe Villamarin in my cell phone I called him. He told me, let's have a beer. For the people who are listening to us, if they don't know Felipe, he's one of the co-founders of Rappi. And he told me, hey, I'm just here figuring something out with this guy called Simon. We're doing something internet, like there was no Rappi at the time. It was something called Imaginamos, which is the digital studio that Simon started with, which basically built a landing page for businesses. And then that pretty quickly jumped into something that's Grability, which most people don't know. Grability is the business out of which the technology that supports Rappi, which is the Dragon Pool and all the technology within the app, was born. So I was right up on in there. Basically, that scaled up. I was lucky enough to be employee number 7 in what is going to be Rappi by then, right? And yeah, my first day, basically, I was pushed into being an entrepreneur, just trying to be part of something cool.
So how long did you stay at Rappi?
So I stayed in Rappi for almost 3 years, up until the SoftBank check, like the $1 billion check. And then I realized that I wanted to learn more about fundraising, right? Because I've always been a salesperson. And for me, it was pretty challenging to meet the sales quota. And I managed a lot of sales teams across my life. However, the next frontier for me was, okay, I'm selling all over the place. How do I sell to investors? This is something that I really want to learn. And of course, the Rappi guys were amazingly generous with the information that they could provide me. But as you may know, they want you to be focused in the business and what you need to do, and not focusing to learn like something that they can handle themselves, which is basically speaking to investors and everything like that. So at that point, just organically, I was pushed into the next step, which was going to be build my own business, right? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anything. So I just started scrapping around, and I found this guy called Julian, which was actually launching something called Fitball in the middle of a park in Bogota via Facebook. I remember very clearly. I sent him at that time a message through Facebook. I remember a DM, right? And I just wanted to convince that guy that I was going to be his co-founder, no matter what. So funny enough, we have met a couple of times because we went to the same college, but then we were completely unknown to each other. We were not friends or anything like that. But of course, I leveraged my position in Rappi, being a director and everything like that, to sound like a fancy guy. And I managed, I was lucky enough that I was invited to Fitball. So then we launched that company. We brought it to 16 different markets in Latin America. Fitball, for the ones that don't know, it's a company that for a monthly subscription allows you to go to every single gym in Latin America. And then we brought that as high as we could, and then COVID hit, and it was a mess. So another point in my life, which purely luck. I start calling all my mentors, and 100% of them told me like, you're a guy that you don't know it yet, but you're in love with growth. That's what drives you. So if you stay in a company that's not going to grow for a while, you're going to kill yourself. So in the worst pandemic of the world, we decided to start a new business. 24 hours later, I was in a call with you. Funny enough.
So before we jump into the Ontop story, which is a fun one, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned from going from 7 people to $1 billion check at Rappi, whether just things you learned on your own or things you learned from the founders?
One of the biggest lessons is that being aggressive and not being kind is easy. You can be a dickhead and grow a company amazingly huge, but you're going to find out that by being aggressive and by being a dick, you can accomplish a lot, but it's not sustainable, it's not fulfilling. So the biggest lesson in Rappi, which funny enough was learned by the founders first and then it went down, as it always goes, is that because Rappi was the first thing in his category, or maybe in that scale in Latin America, if you're not talking about, for example, Mercado Libre, because that's like a very hidden story that nobody knows how it really went. So the first public story like of success in Silicon Valley putting money into it was Rappi. We tend to believe that we were like wolves, like we needed to be hyper aggressive, like driven by blood on the street, always closing, this kind of culture that of course is going to make you scale at great heights, but takes a toll personally on you. It bites like a little bit of you, and you find yourself working for something that even though it fulfills you because it allows you to feel your ego and to feel successful, as a person you feel that you're not connected with your teams. So the biggest lesson that actually Simon told me the hard way was the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo's like single star players can be great to deploy businesses into a skyrocketing position, but you want something more like Messi, which is basically a guy that's going to pass the ball every time he can to make sure the team can score. And that's the kind of feel that you get. So you only get that by being kind. And kind is something that you need to purposely be conscious that you need to put yourself in that position to most like push yourself to be kind. It's not easy. Like it's the easy path is to be a dick.
I think that's a really good lesson. And I think it's poetic that Ronaldo's only major championship with Portugal was when he went off injured in the first half and the rest of his team had to take it forward. I think it's really a pretty interesting thing. It fits well with that. So fast forward to back to where we were. So you had the idea. We got on a call 24 hours later. Walk me through the fundraise and getting the company off the ground from the day you had the call onward.
So that's crazy because most entrepreneur or entrepreneurial stories that you're going to listen are about this guy that has this vision and had this idea or he solved his own problem, which is completely the opposite of what happened to us. We just figured that we needed an idea that could supply us in four different fronts. First one, frequency. Second, high growth. Third, recurrency. And fourth, and more importantly, appetite in the investor side of things. So with those four like things in mind, we start looking for ideas. Funny enough, at that time, of course, with COVID, remote work was the obvious thing to look at. So without a shred of a doubt, we thought how we can take something out of football and put it on steroids. That was our main thing. Because you need to bet on your strengths, not in your lack of weakness. I've been seeing a lot of people that want to be great at everything, but you need to be humble enough to know that you suck at most things, right? I mean, if you're not Jeff Bezos or one of these guys, Elon Musk, that are great at everything, but most of us are going to be most likely pretty good at something specifically, and you need to double down on that. That's going to give you more possibilities to actually achieve something, because then you realize that what you're missing is someone that's crazy good at something else. So organically, you turn your brain into filling yourself with people that are greater than you in different things. So at that time, we were paying over 1,500 gyms all over Latin America. We're sending money. Most of these gyms are contractors because they own their own gym. So they have like the CrossFit gym in their house, whatever. So we said, what if instead of paying gyms internationally and allowing them to do legal business, right, tax wise, can we do this for people? Like people are starting to work remotely. Can we do this for people? And then we went through our checklist, right? Is it high growth? Is it has an appetite? It has high frequency? And it checked out. And basically that was it.
So you guys used an interesting strategy both to raise your initial money and to also get some of your first clients. And I think your slide with the 20-something faces on it has become kind of mythical in early stage LATAM startups. I've seen a lot of people try to replicate that over the past kind of year. Tell the people what that was and how you did it and why.
So basically, we were sure that we weren't going to raise any money, right? We were scared like a lot. So we figured, hey, what's the best thing that could happen to us? If we wanted to, at that point, we wanted to raise $50,000, right? So we said, is it possible to get like $20,000 checks? And when you're thinking about Latin American currencies, that's like a high number, right? And funny enough, when you try to reach the people that have that money on the bank, they have better options to put that money in, right? So I was scared shitless because I was talking to all these founders, and all of these founders have more businesses to invest in, or even their own business. They don't have time for me, right? So I'd say, what about I start looking for people that are some way connected to the ecosystem, either as a founder or either as an investor, and I try to convince them to put $1,000. Worst case scenario, I put it myself, and I just let them know that I'm going to put their picture in the slide. Funny enough, the first 3 people that I did that to, they were like, let's do it, because at that point it's more like a bet, like you're playing roulette, right? Let's see what happens, right? It's like a cheap price to enter a competition. So we were seeing all these founders. Somehow there was like this like, I don't know if it was like social thought or anything, that checks had to be 10K at least, right? That was like the main thing. And I said, fuck that. Like I can get like $1,000 for you, like $5,000 from you. So all these founders started to put in, and then once we started to gather a little bit of traction, we started to get a little bit more greedy, right? So once went with $1,000, then no, you can only get in with 5,000. But at the time that we reached what was supposed to be as an acceptable check size, which was 10K, we already had like 10 people. So it just skyrocketed from there.
And I think I would assume that it was similar to with us, where once we were in and wrote the check, I think sent you 2 or 3 more people and said, hey, these guys would be great. I'm sure other people did the same. So it was like a flywheel of social proof.
100% it was like that. And it was crazy because we were jumping. People tried to see that as a success, but in reality, I just remember it as being like 2 weeks on my room, speaking with over 1,000 people and getting checks just from 20 of them. So what tends to be seen as a success, in reality, if you look at the metrics, is pure bullshit. Like, this guy just managed to convince 20 people out of 1,000, and with $1,000 each is crazy bad. But funny enough, people tend to overlook like the amount of work volume that you need to put in to get something out of it. So in our mind, I just woke up and I just needed somehow to speak with at least 50 people that day. And that was my main thing. I was just so focused in just speaking to them. I didn't even want the check or anything like that. And keeps you going, because otherwise you're just going to see the failures. You just want to, like, something that kept me pretty positive was the fact that I just reached that 50 number. And that for me was winning already.
So what you said about making sure you get enough calls in a day is something, when we were talking about this before we started recording, looking at kind of your sales engine. It's one of the best ones we've seen, if not the top one in our portfolio of companies. Walk us through kind of how you think about building a sales engine.
So basically, someone that hasn't sold anything in their lives, most likely are going to judge the effort by the output, right? So you need to sell $10,000, or you need to close 3 accounts. But as a salesman myself, because I needed to be in the street every day. Like I had by that time when I was in Rappi, I didn't have the luxury of actually having these kind of calls, right? It was in person. So I learned pretty quickly that the best salesmen or saleswomen that I came across were the ones that actually were focusing the input and not the output. Because the output, it's going to be there's going to be a lot of things that you cannot control, starting with sales cycle, right? If someone forgets about your call, or tends to be a little bit longer to respond, or if you're focusing into the outcome, there's a lot of things that you cannot control. When in reality, in the input aspect of things, how many calls you make and how many demos you have, you can control everything, right? Imagine there's a holiday coming, right? Every single salesperson is going to say, fuck, my numbers are going to drop because the output is not going to be the one that I'm expecting because I'm going to be working one day less. That's going to be 20% less of that week if you're thinking about a 5-day week, right? That's the output thinking. The input thinking is, I don't give a shit. Like I can send the same amount of email, the same amount of calls. I can have the same amount of demos in that day. And if it's a holiday in that country, I can have another country calling. So you can control input. So first thing is focus on input. And then you just have to have a leap of faith because the engine is going to be warming up. And that warm up period is going to be your sales cycle. So that's what we like to call in Ontop the leap of faith. Just trust the process and just allow the sales cycle to complete at least one. Because once that first sales cycle completes, then you're going to be having a turnover like win deals every single day, because every single day the engine completes again, right? So first of all, focus on input. Second of all, find out something predictable. In our case, the single most predictable variable in our model was demos. Because in a lot of countries, when you try to deploy, or different cities, you're going to find out that there are different cultures. We Latin people like to be liked. So we're pretty bad saying no, right? So they're going to take your calls, they're going to take your emails. However, it's very different and when you speak to a German person or to a US person, right? Because those people are just going to tell you to fuck off. They don't have any time to lose. So when you take a look at the ratios, they're not predictable, because once you can make few demos in the countries in which people don't have time for you, but you can make a lot of demos in countries when you actually, people tend to say yes all the time. What changed the game for us was after the demo, because we saw that prospecting people was not predictable, right? But actually having the call and testing our product was very predictable, because no matter if you were in the US or in Germany or in Africa, most likely 1 out of 3 people were going to close. So we focused in that predictable metric. So step 1, focus on input. Step 2, find your predictable metric, right? Step 3, you need to find a baseline. So for us, we thought about the most successful market that we launched, and we find the amount of demos per person per day that were happening in that market. And without any data, we just decided that was the gold standard, right? And funny enough, that was 1 demo per hunter per day. That was like the ratio, that what we like to call the gold ratio. And we just push people to accomplish that ratio in every single market, because we said if this can be done by focusing on input, right? In a market, they should be done in every single market, because again, you're not talking about output, you're talking about input. So we just drove our teams all the way to reach that gold standard, and that's how we grow the company.
It's really impressive to see just how much thought you've put into and productizing or processizing the sales engine. So talk about going from, you raised that round with all of the founders in the region, and then fast forward today, you opened up saying you're now in almost 200 countries. Walk us through kind of the big milestones or the 0 to 1 here over the last kind of year-ish in that growth story.
So that's, for us, what has been our engine, like mental engine, let's say, is the fact that I wake up every single morning feeling that this is going to fail. I don't know why, but for me, that just puts my mind into one spot. So since I'm not special, right, and I'm good at sales, I'm going to do sales either way, right? Because that's the only thing that I can do well. My co-founder does product great. So in his mind, he's going to do product and nothing else. What keeps us awake at night is just by building product and selling, you're not going to make $1 billion company. So you need to figure a way to start looking for those people who are great at what they do, which is very different to what you do. So basically, in that train of thought, our obsession is to be out of a job every day. I'm looking to be unemployed, right? My vision is to be unemployed. Why is that? Because if I can find someone that does what I'm doing right now, this day, this week, better than myself, I'm out of a job, right? So my job is always to be out of a job. But that happens infinitely. So every time you wake up, you have just one task. Find someone that does something that you're doing better than yourself and bring him in, right? But it's so hard to do so. And people just, there's something crazy that happens. Because think about it. When you're trying to convince someone that's better than you at something, most likely they're going to be figured out by themselves and they're not like out of a job or anything. Most likely they're going to be in a great job, right? And they're going to be way smarter than you. So you're already in disadvantage because you're talking to someone who's smarter and it's a comfortable position. Why the hell are they going to come to your vision, right? That's why I feel like every single day is more challenging, because when you are out of a job, then you are part of a more important job, if it makes any sense, right? Because it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and you just get more responsibility. And funny enough, people don't understand that at some point. I'd say that point is when you have over $1 million, right? When you have over $1 million fundraised, you most likely are going to, you can choose one person, whoever it is in the world, that is the best at what they do. Not a few of them, but only one. And it's going to you're going to be able to pay that person. I can assure you that, with $1 million. But then what happens is very interesting, because at that point, people don't give a shit about money. So how are you going to convince them? Is it money really what you need? So then something magical happens and you start thinking that, okay, if these people have walked the talk, they're in a position if they don't care about money, are the people in the very bottom of the funnel the same way? And yes, they are. It's just that they don't know it yet because they haven't get to the pass of time in which they have all the money. But something awakens in you and you start to know that you are not your company anymore. You are not, Ontop is not Santiago and Julian. Ontop is Ontop. You're just a part of it. And once you take the founder out of that and you stop focusing on being famous, which is the worst disease that you can cut, being famous is not being successful, then Ontop can be bigger than yourself. And then people want to work for Ontop, not for you, for Ontop, or for whatever company you're building. So you're always scared because you're in a constant pursuit of how do I bring the better talent and how do I manage to be out of a job, because the higher good is basically Ontop, not myself.
That's really powerful. If you could go back to when you were just starting to join FitPal, knowing everything you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
That's a great segue, because in FitPal we thought that being famous was being basically successful, right? So we focused our efforts into appearing in every magazine, writing books, doing every single cover that we could. And I mean, likes and on social media and ego is not the same as growth, if it makes any sense. However, it's a pretty comfortable dopamine trap, since you feel good about yourself, right? Like, I don't give a shit if I'm not growing. I'm the shit. Look at me. I'm in the magazine, right? And somehow you manage to convince yourself that that's going to bring you business, which is the shittiest thing that you can do. You truly believe that by appearing in a cover of a magazine, there's going to be a workflow of clients going to your product, which can be like, it's so far from what actually happens. Is not what happens at all. Actually, most of the time it's not going to happen. But then you just read that article about when Amazon appeared in Yahoo or whatever, and they just hit product market fit because they appeared in Yahoo or whatever. But you manage to convince yourself you need to be seen as a successful founder to be successful, when in reality you just need to shut the fuck up and talk to your users. I really like and I clicked this when I read this article that Paul Graham, the founder of YC, wrote about the difference between a well and an ocean. You don't want to have an ocean because an ocean is a product that everybody uses that they don't give a shit about, basically a commodity. You want to build a well, which is something that a few people use, but it's so deep, it's so deeply a core issue of their lives that they're going to basically get killed for your product. And that's when something magical happens, because you hit network effects, which is something that I didn't understand. Like, I think people should be talking about more about that, since the easiest way to hit network effects is by actually focusing in getting a small group of people that love you, rather than the actual thinking of, I need to reach as many people as I can, because those people are going to make sure that they tell their friends what amazing thing changed their lives. So in a nutshell, the lesson is being famous is not being successful, and you should be focusing, funny enough, not into building something huge, but building something small, but with people that actually love your product so much that they're going to be in charge of making that big.
Do you have any books, blogs, or podcasts or specific articles that you really like, whether about startups or just life in general?
100%. Something that really caught my mind and was something that changed our lives is Measure What Matters by John Doerr, in which he deploys his theory about OKRs, which basically was Andy Grove's founder and CEO of Intel theory, that then he later catch into John, and he deployed into Google. So Measure What Matters is one. The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I know those two books are cliches, but are so good. Something that I haven't seen often, but it really changed the way we think in our company, is Radical Candor. It's a book by Kim Scott, which talks about the importance of having positive friction within your organization. One of the most difficult things that could happen within our organization is that you're not having hard conversations, and that should be happening all the time, because people tend to keep negative feedback for themselves, when in reality, negative feedback should be something that flows up and down and up, every single day, every day. So, and even more so in Latin cultures, because if you're building a startup as a Latin American, you're going to be having what we like to call a lot of happy meetings, in which everyone's happy and everything is going great. That's a horrible meeting. That's actually what's happening, is that people are looking to be liked, right? And they're looking to exact topics that are going to keep the conversation comfortable, when in reality, all the issues that need to be addressed are not being addressed. So avoid happy meetings, and Radical Candor is a great book for that. And I want to be very specific here. This does not mean that you need to be a dickhead. You don't need to scream. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to fire people on the spot. I'm not saying that you need to become Steve Jobs, right? I'm just saying that you need to be direct and address issues, and you need to be comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. And most likely, you're going to be looking actively to get them to get to those conversations.
What's the next couple of years look like for the business going forward?
So at Ontop, we want to do what Zoom did for remote work, we want to do for personal finance. What I mean by this is that everybody figured that they could work remotely and they could spend more time with their families, save the commute time, and be more productive. And I'm not saying that the future is going to be remote, but definitely it's going to be decentralized. That means that you're going to choose where you want to work from. So essentially, that's the first wave of decentralization. The second wave of decentralization is people figuring, okay, I can have my life like that, but what about my personal finance? If I already have a great job, I'm earning in top currency, let's say US dollars, why the hell am I keeping that currency in local currency, right? Let's think about Colombia for a second. 11% devaluation in our currency. You have political instability, but you like to live in Colombia. Where are you going to live, Colombia? It's a cheap place to live. You're with your family. And let's talk about all the people that live in developing markets. And the leverage actually happens when you live in a developing markets and you earn a developed currency, right? A developed market currency. So let's say you live in Latin America and you earn in dollars. That's the basic. So the second wave is, how do I figure this out? How can I optimize that? And the second wave is personal finance. So am I able to live in Latin America, hang with my family, earn in dollars, but also save and invest in dollars? Because if I can decentralize effectively my personal finance, and that's not tied to my nationality, I won, because I can live whatever I want and I can optimize for cost of living. So Ontop is becoming what we like to call the stepping stone, or let's say the bank for the future of work. The future of work, I truly believe that's going to happen in developing markets, which are the ones that have more hunger to actually get caught up into what the future is bringing to all of us as a species.
It's a great mission, and I think you're right on trend. And thanks for sharing your story. And it's going to be fun to continue to work and support you as you continue to build. Thanks again.
Oh, happy to be a part of the family, and thank you so much for the invitation to the podcast.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with our guest Santiago Aparicio. And thank you to Angel Andraca for producing this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend and give us a rating on iTunes or whatever you listen to podcasts. It's the best way to share what's going on in Latin America's ecosystem.